Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where movement, mindset, and mastery meet. Join us as we explore the art of living fully with expert guests and real-life stories to inspire your journey. And welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast with your host, Brad Marshall. And today I'm excited to be joined by Greg Pyszcynski, new resident of Fuquay Arena down here. And we've got a chance to meet each other in the fitness circles down here. And he's doing some really cool things with the gym that he's building. So I'm really excited to dive in and learn a little bit more about his story and how he found health and fitness and how he's turning his passion into a gym. So Greg, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Appreciate you having me on. It means a lot.
Yeah, and I always love hearing people's stories because I think they're so unique on, where they grew up, what they got into, and how they came to find health and fitness or strength and conditioning. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to find health and fitness and strength and conditioning, get interested in this whole world of coaching.
So for me, it started when I was probably 12, 11 range. Came from a single parent family home, but before that it was relative to us. I wouldn't say it was the worst thing in the world, but not the best physically, mentally. Going into, I was always too heavy to play town football. So when my brother was trying to get me on, and when I was like 10, I would have had to play with the 11th and 12th graders. So was getting ready to try out for modified football with the school. And I mean, that's 11, 12, if I remember correctly. I was 265. So back then, now this is going back like mid 90s, right? So like would have been the poster child for childhood obesity at the time. But got into modified football, finally found like a community, right? Finally found people that like didn't judge me for being fat, didn't pick on me like when I was with the team, like we were just trying to win football games, right? So, and then about 2 months in, my left femur slipped out of a slipped epiphysis, if I remember to say it correctly. So football was done. My orthopedic surgeon's like, you'll never play contact collision sports ever again. I have a 6-inch pin in my left hip. So it's like I spent all these years alone, isolated, found a community, found friends. I'm somebody with a common goal, and then gone in a heartbeat. So went through like the rehab, which wasn't much back then, but got through the rehab. And then at the end of the season, the orthopedic surgeon said, hey, if you want to start lifting, you can. So my football coach at the time had been a power lifter in college. So started learning about powerlifting. And then when I was 13, I competed. I ended up doing pretty decent. Hindsight, I probably should just kept powerlifting. I was better at it than I understood at the time. But when I was 13, I squatted 585, I deadlifted 585, and I benched, I think, 335 in a meet. And so those were my best at the time. Going then into freshman year of high school, still wasn't allowed to play football. Going into the freshman season, still hadn't been allowed to play. Went back to the orthopedic surgeon, was like, hey, what's the deal? He's like, well, I'll clear you. He's like, your bone is so dense from whatever you've been doing. He's like, you should be fine. So got the green light to play football. My apologies. Got the green light to play football, and then ended up following that. And then there was obviously the strength and conditioning side that I stayed with powerlifting, all this and that. So fast forward a couple years through college football, and then started coaching college football in Utica. But then I always found myself in the weight room. So I was a football GA, but I was coaching all the strength and conditioning for all the sports teams because it was D3. There was no strength coach, right? So I started doing all that. Took an internship at Eastern Michigan. That led to a GA, and then eventually I became an associate head there. And then I bounced around to University of Illinois Champaign with football. Went back to Buffalo as a head strength coach at the University of Buffalo. And then from there went to Iowa State as what I eventually became the director of applied performance engineering for football. So basically, to keep it simple, overweight, unhealthy, bad things. Found out that the one thing I could control, because at the time, coming from my upbringing, like there was no control, right? Like it was trying to please somebody. There was emotional roller coasters. You thought doing this would get to the outcome that you hoped for or you desired, but it didn't, even though the last time it did, right? So when I found the weight room, like the old Henry Rollins quote, right? Like 135 is 135. You either moved it or you didn't. And at the end of the day, like if you work hard enough, you can move it, right? So like the weight room and training gave me, and then once I found out about like how to actually train, right? Like I started realizing like I could program a very predictable outcome. So for the first time in my life, I felt like I actually had control. Like, and then once I realized you could do that for a profession and help other people get guided to an outcome that was going to help them in some other form or way. So like for me, I ended up going in the sport route at university, and was able to construct and build out these programs, these systemized sequences that would lead to, for sport play, obviously, was their outputs, right? So like, we could get an increase in speed or vertical or horizontal jump, and then that generally correlated into their performance, right? I won't say it's 100% guaranteed, because we all have people we've worked with that have super high outputs, but they don't understand the skill or transfer it. But to keep it simple, like people started seeing better outcomes through advancement physically, right? And then just the fact that like the power behind watching somebody succeed, especially when it's something like they don't like, the thing that gets my rocks off, that like, which is why I named it Undenied, is like people that I think society is really shitty right now. And I think there's this overall lack of reminding people that they're capable, right? Like people can be somewhere right now and they want to go do something, and they're going to get 3 or 5 no's right off the bat, but it just like cuts everyone down. It leaves them in their tracks and they stay where they are. And it's like, you just got to keep jumping, right? So like for me, it goes back to like giving people this setting that gives them, empowerment, gives them experiences to build proof that they're capable. And then realizing that the slow, steady climb, sticking to the process, there's that book, Chop Wood, Carry Water, like just stay in the groove, like do it again. You don't have to do this thing that's super fancy or over the top. Like just do it again, get a little bit better, do it again. And then like next thing you know, it's like, oh my goodness. You know what I mean? So it's like, and if with youth kids too, and the young population, I mean, some of the parents and the adults we talk to, it's like, there's nobody reminding these kids, like they're in this beautiful stage of life, right? Where like everything should be on the table. And it's like somebody's already telling the kid, like, you dream too big, or your dream's too lofty, or you know what, you should not dream that way because it's dangerous, right? And it's like everyone's freedom is in the dream, but there's such a lack of dreaming. And then that leads to everybody being denied. And then next thing you know, like you wake up one day and it's like, you could have had a great, simple life. Like everything was good. You always made ends meet, but it's like, will you get to the next stage and then, see that person that you could have become, simply because you chose to not continue to pursue? But like if you've never taught or around like-minded people that are constantly trying to pursue something beyond, right? Like it's the consistently moving goalpost, right? And it's about falling in love with that, because like it just keeps pulling more out of you, right? Like it's always leveling up. So I kind of went on a couple different routes there, but
No, there's a lot of threads that I'm excited to pull on that you shared there. And I always love hearing from folks how the thing that they found that gave them the greatest joy or passion or allowed them to kind of get back on a track for their life is the thing that they end up doing to try and help others in the same regards. So you mentioned, at a young age, finding a community and how important that was, but then having an injury, which for a lot of folks can derail them, especially when you think about not being able to go back to the thing you really enjoy. What did it mean to you to have the coach still be around and checking in on you and saying like, hey, I've got this other avenue lifting. I think this could be a good fit for you, and not just saying like, oh, you can't play football anymore? Well, good luck. Hope you do well, but I'm not going to necessarily be there to support you anymore.
yeah, I mean, his name was Pat Braunscheidel, and like always ever grateful for him, because once I was cleared to lift, like he let me continue to lift with the team. And then I was volunteering, if you will, with the team still. So like I'd get equipment out, I'd still be at practice. I'd still try to watch and learn, the thought of maybe coaching one day was there potentially. But like, that I think goes back to those special people that have the awareness, right? Like, seeing what could and could not happen before it does, like having an idea where this could go, and like always being aware of like who it is like you're talking to. And for him, he was an educator. He'd been a teacher for years. At that point, him knowing where I was at from my home life and seeing the impact it had on me when I first started being part of the team, I think is where, again, going back to the awareness side of things, like I think he knew that if he didn't help kind of bring that together for me to have some structure and stay part of something, like for me, like I can tell you, like I don't know where I would have ended up. Like there's a good chance I may not be here. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and that was just goes back to like where we were at mentally. And I say we, like my brother and I both kind of were in a similar boat. He was older, but you know, we transcended a little bit differently. But the community thing is what kind of helped me like realize that like life wasn't a waste, or that like I didn't matter, like that I could have a purpose, that I wasn't just some stick blown in the wind, that like I mattered, right? Like that's what it came down to, is that like he made me feel that like I actually mattered as a human, you know, more so than any of the things I ever did, from the lifting and then eventually with playing football, but like that my existence meant something to somebody else. So that's where I would say that really kind of is what kept me grounded through that time.
Yeah, it's amazing how meaningful community can be. And I think, you know, growing up as kids, that's one of the great things about joining a team, is you start to understand this community. But then you also have people who are looking out for you and seeing what can I do to help support and guide folks through. Because even as not only adolescents, teenagers, adults, if there's an injury or you're kind of ripped away from a team or a community that you're used to, it is a really, really hard thing. And I'm sure you're well aware of that, working in sports for as long as you have. When an athlete gets injured, sometimes they just completely feel disconnected from a team, and the ability to plug back in, whether that's, hey, I still want to be around the team, I want to lift with them, get stuff out, but I still want to be a part of this community, it's huge. And sometimes it takes folks to kind of force you to stay in the community or pull you back in, because there's a lot of isolation that, like you said, it can get people to go down tough paths, and that can be challenging. But I like that lesson of, hey, community is so important, regardless of if things are going well or not going well. Stay plugged in, because it'll get you through some of those tough times, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think that you kind of touched on it there. Like the thing about the community side of things, especially if you've got a setback, a delay, or you're injured or you're limited, right? Like, is blood is thicker than water, right? Like family is very important. But, and I won't say all families, but sometimes, more often than not, I think the family side of protection will always kind of maybe lead you away from comfort and maybe like the unknown. Whereas like, you know, when you're part of a gym community, like if you got a setback, like, you know, like if I say I was in a cast and I was part of greater culture, right? Like I know this from my experiences, me coming into my group that I've been with for say 2 years, what that will do for my mental state to still show up. And even if say you guys didn't have the capability to adjust something for me, right? The atmosphere and the energy and the people that you have built and done certain things with that nobody else even had perspective on. Their smile, they're asking how you're doing. Like I always take it back to like when stuff hits the fan, it's that person that picks up the phone at 3 a.m. Like that's the real family member, right? Like, and I don't mean to take away from actual family, but there's a different mindset when you get those people and you build those things with, because they are looking at it from a perspective of being shoulder to shoulder with you, because maybe they know where your intent's at, they know where your goals are at, they know where your dreams are at, right? And that's where I say sometimes with family, like they go into protective mode because it's blood, right? And they don't always see, they may think it's delusional. Whereas the one that picked up at 3 a.m., he knows it's only a delusion until it actually happens, and he knows it's going to happen, right? So like that is that community essence that I think about when I think of those things. Like that's
There's a certain level of success, if you want to call it that, you can achieve by yourself. If you want to see truly how far and what your potential is, then finding individuals that form a group, that form a team, that are allowing to push each other, it is just incredible how much further you can go. And even for folks who are like, well, I train by myself in my garage or this or that, most likely there's still some kind of coach, there's still some kind of friend, there's somebody that there's a conversation with that's continually pushing you, regardless of good times and bad. And I thought what was interesting too is, so you had a coach who believed in you and said, hey, I still want you to be part of this team, this community. And it sounds like there was some success that you were experiencing along the way. Then when you mentioned getting into powerlifting and some of those numbers hitting at 13, I mean, there's a lot of grown men who are incredible athletes who will never touch those numbers, let alone hitting them at, 13 years old. So what did that do for your confidence and the way you sort of viewed yourself experiencing some success in a specific area of your life that allowed you to get maybe more excited about and continue to push it there?
I think what the success of the powerlifting side of the experience is it gave me like true confidence, like the ability to walk tall, have my eyes up, engage people with my eyes. Like, with my background, like I was always eyes down, submissive, was afraid to speak up. I was very quiet. But powerlifting, it gave me exposure and practice to be loud, right? To be amped up, to show emotion and not suffer a negative consequence, right? And then that kind of is what led me to start to carry that through like everyday living. Like I wasn't on a great path just yet, but like the powerlifting gave me physical confidence. When I was in college, I bounced because every football player bounces because it's the easiest thing to do to make a couple bucks. But it allowed me to like at least be aware of having the ability to take care of myself. Not that I was malicious, because I was still always played it safe more often than not. And then once I realized, when I got out of college and I started pursuing it as a career, and I realized what I was doing was leading to success or KPIs improving, which was also then correlating to performances. That physical confidence starts to get more mental confidence. And then you start to get this totality, right? Like it kind of pulled everything together, but it started from the lack of physicalness. And then it just kind of started stacking. And then that's really what I would say was the base root of me getting to where I got to. Because like you walk into a room of 35 college football players, right, that are 18 to 22, full of piss and vinegar, and I was 26 at the time. They ain't looking at me like who are you? I'm nobody. I'm just telling you, if we do it this way, it's going to work out better than if we do it that way. That's all I'm trying to do, is present opportunities, right? So like you learn real quick to be confident that is actually real confidence, because the false bravado or the loud voice or the whatever type of that kind of concept, 18, 22-year-olds cut you down real quick, man. Whether it's with their eyes, their words, or their comments, like they get to the reality real quick, right? So like you learn to then take these confidence concepts, but actually make sure that they are real, suitable, and they stand on firm ground, because you start building these relationships. And a lot of the kids we worked with like came from really, really bad environments. I've worked with kids where like they rotated Motel 6s during the week. Like that's what they did in high school. They had 3 t-shirts. They had 1 pair of shoes until that they outgrew them, and then they might have gotten a new one, or they waited a little bit longer and then they got new shoes, right? So like you're dealing with kids that were trying to change their lives like beyond comprehension, some of them, so that confidence then kind of gets taken into a realm where it is about being shoulder to shoulder, right, eye to eye with the people you're influencing now, and treating them as equals, even though they may not be equals from a knowledge standpoint or an execution standpoint, but reminding yourself that it is about the development, right? Just like the development, like I experienced from going from weak and feeble to strong and confident. Now you're trying to take this knowledge that you have and be able to express it, because the goal is improvement, right? Success is progress. That's how I view success, as progress. So like you're trying to take someone who wants to go hot and heavy because they want change now, and you're trying to educate them in a fashion that allows them to see that progress is success, that they don't need to go 100 miles a minute right now, that if they slow down to prepare, then they can go 100 miles an hour, right? So all those things kind of were always at play through the collegiate experiences I had. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And when you talk about this idea of building confidence, I can 100% relate to that. And it's amazing to see how individuals come to a gym, a team, whatever it might be, and whether it's a false sense of bravado, or they are coming to you because they are maybe in a low point of like, hey, I'm not confident in my body. I'm not confident in who I am or what I'm projecting or putting out into the world. And you start to see those little pieces of like, oh, I was able to do this workout. I lifted this weight. I finished this. And you just start to see these small, subtle shifts. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I can do challenging things in the gym. Has changed the way I think about myself, which is now leading me to be a little bit more confident. And for some folks, it can be fast. For some folks, it can be slow. Did you notice for you, like because of the success you were experiencing, was it kind of a quicker process of going from weak and feeble to feeling very competent and confident in what you're capable of? And then obviously it has to get tested along the way as you work through high school and college. But what was that process like? Was it like a slow kind of developing process that you had other folks encouraging and helping you understand what you were doing and how you were building confidence? Or was the kind of just like turn it on and you're like, wow, I can lift well and I'm just confident now?
I would say for me, it was slow in the beginning, and that goes back to my upbringing and my childhood. That was really, I wouldn't say traumatic, but it left very deep roots or impressions. But the thing that helped me was I powerlifted with one of my best friends who was playing football. And then we ended up playing together throughout high school. And then we both went into college and played. But he was kind of a big impact on me simply because he was that realist, right? Like he would look at me and be like, do you realize what you just did? And then he would start, and now again, we're talking powerlifting numbers, right? But he'd start pulling up numbers. He'd be like, you beat it, you beat it, you beat it. You were here, now you're here. So like, I think confidence is, there's always going to be rare few that it just oozes out of. It's natural, whatever they have going on from a neural profile, right? Like it's just there, and that's one of their gifts. For others, I think it is a learning process, and it's something that it's a skill, right? Like, because even like if you listen to some like, I don't know, your Ed Milet's, those type of motivational speakers, like even those types of people will still sit there and say like, I'm still sometimes not very confident, right? Like, and it's a constant reminder that like anything else, like to become exceptional, there is a continued fight for consistency, fighting for repetitions, fighting to sustain a current level. Like if you're training for 3 years, right? And then you stop training for a year, whatever that last workout you did, and say it was at a peak, a year off, and then go back to that workout, you're going to be nowhere near it, right? And I think confidence is one of those things where like you always got to try to find a way to keep the edge sharp. Because I do think for most people, it's a skill that they can lose sometimes rather quickly. Like I know for me, when we first started getting out the word about being open, right? Like meeting somebody, trying to shake their hand, just be like, hey, not trying to solicit, not trying to sell anything, just letting you know there's a gym open up, right? And it's like I have done way harder things in my life. I know I have. But that first person is like, it's the last thing I want to do. Like the world's on fire, the bike's on fire, the ground's on fire, everything's supposed to be okay, but it's not, right? Like, and it's like, all you're doing is saying hi to somebody and tell them you just opened a new business. It's like, and I could sit here and say this on this, I can be on this podcast, this doesn't bother me, but it's like going and meeting that person, right? And then just talking about like the real version of you. And being, and this is, I'm portraying this back to the confidence concept, is that confidence is a skill that I think you have to continually rep because people are afraid to be unapologetically them. And sometimes I think they put the weight of others' views, or what's the word I'm looking for? Critiques. And they put so much weight in that why would you be confident if you're always worried about how someone's going to view you, right? But I think once you break that threshold or that tipping point where you can be unapologetically you, I think then the confidence stays a lot higher, a lot more consistently with less effort to sustain it. But I think until you realize like who you are, what you're about, what you stand on, and it's unwavering, that's, I think, when you see true confidence just ooze out of people. And I think that's kind of the game changer when it comes to confidence.
Yeah, and you start to find out that, confidence is a belief in what you're capable of or what you can accomplish. And so you can build confidence in specific areas like you talked about, like, hey, when I've got a barbell on my back, 100% confident. And then all of a sudden you go work on meeting people face to face and you're like, ooh, like the confidence I had in this weight room translates to some extent of like, I know I'm capable, but it's different now in this setting over here. And so that's what's so unique about confidence, is that some areas of your life you can be like, I have a very strong belief in what I know, what I can do, how I can impact other people. And then in others you're like, I need to work on this and I need to figure out, but I have the blueprint for how to go about building that. And something you said there, this idea of how we're so wrapped up in other people's opinions, it keeps us from truly being confident. Because if I'm always worried about what somebody's opinion is of me or what they think of me, their critiques, if you will, then how am I ever going to be confident? It's something outside of my control. I have no say or influence over what other people are doing. But if I'm so worried about that, I'll never find a place where I'm truly confident. So it's a personal process. It is a skill that can be built, and you've got the blueprint there. And it was cool to hear how that process went for you with the weight room. And then, you can even get it tested in certain environments with 22-year or 18 to 22-year-olds. And then even now as a business owner, like, it's just new levels and new scenarios that you're constantly unlocking. And I think it's one of the most fun aspects of coaching and working with folks is trying to help them build confidence. And you mentioned, you're working with sometimes athletes who come from really, really challenging backgrounds, and there could be a false sense of bravado there, and you're trying to build true confidence in them. You're working with kids and trying to help them see and dream and see what's possible, probably even working with adults. What have you come to learn or understand about how you can help build confidence in other folks through training, through weightlifting, etc.?
I think the biggest thing is always goes back to like finding the right starting point, right? So I don't believe in like never letting people not experience failure, right? Because then there's been a bunch of people that have talked about this, but like you can't win without losing. Because if you've never lost, winning doesn't mean anything, right? You can't experience love without loss. Like there's that demographic or that concept of like, with one, you need to have its inverse or its opposite to truly grasp or appreciate the reward or that dream outcome you're chasing, right? So like, I think with the adults I work with and working with youth athletes, I think the biggest thing is finding them a starting point that they can have success with, especially if they're super unconfident or they have no experience, right? Like, you want to give them a lever to pull that lets them stand on firm ground. And then when they have, so say it's like a goblet squat, right? They've been, they're on exposure 3 or 4. Their confidence is high. They can get set up and they look really good repeatedly. So now it's like, hey, I'm going to challenge you today. You've been really good with the goblet squat. Your setup is great. You've been picking your numbers. Like, you're always like money with it. Well, let's challenge today. So like, let's challenge their status now in something that they know they're confident in, but let one thing be the challenge. So in this example, it would be the load, right? And now get them to something where like, not max effort, but like you're taking them to like a 9 or a 10 where like, whew, I got like 3 reps left. I'm wondering whether or not I can do this. And then you can start to remind them has that, because you'll see it, right? Like, I'm sure you've seen it. Like, they got, a heavy triple today and they've hit it for singles, right? Maybe they've clustered out singles. So they've done like a set of 6, right? And now they got one set of 3 with the same weight, but they haven't done 3 in a row like that. So it's like, boom, first rep looks really good. Hey, that's it, man. That second rep, they get it, but they're like, and you see it. And it's like, okay, now you can start throwing out the cues. You can start throwing out the reminders. Like, something I try to remind myself to say is like, you've been here before. Because like, you want to pull them back to their experiences. Like starting a business is hard, right? And this may sound arrogant, cocky. I don't mean it to be. The thing I remind myself of is I've never failed. That doesn't mean I crushed it on the first go. That doesn't mean I did it the first time. That doesn't mean it didn't take me a long time. But like, I remind myself I've never failed. There's not one thing I've ever pursued that I've failed at. That's for me. I know what that means to me. And that's something that gives me firm ground to stand on when I face challenges or I face unknowns, right? Because everything's just a learning curve. And that's one thing we try to talk with everybody about, irregardless of age. It's like, you want to lose 20 pounds. Okay. How quickly can you learn the habits that will lead to progress to get you to specific outcome? And I'm not saying, and I'm taking a 1,000-foot view here with this as a simple concept, but it's like, what can we give people that they have experience with that they can see, that they can fall back on, that they know they can rely on. And then confidence slowly starts to stack. And that goes back to giving people a stack of proof of what they are capable of, right? And then reminding them they are capable. You started here, you got to here. Like we had a member this morning when we started teaching front squat, 65 pounds for a set of 6. 20 some odd days later, it's 175 for a set of 6, right? So like, but he's been consistent. He has been consistent, right? So like leading up to today, I knew it was going to be a push day. So it's like, hey, you've been putting in the work, right? Hey, we're going to have a little bit of a go today, but like it's with the same stuff we've been doing. You have been doing, right? So, because I think sometimes when people get to challenges that maybe put their confidence on shaky ground, they don't recall what they've done up to this point. So it's like, as a coach, you're trying to always, I think as a coach, when you're talking about confidence and building that with people, irregardless of age, it's like, you've been here. It may have looked different. It may have weighed different. It may have been in a different setting, but like you have been here before. So it's trying to pull the connections in, right? So they have, like I said, I always go back to the concept of like, you have firm ground. You're standing, right? Continue to stand on it now. Even though this is something you feel is dramatically different, it's not. You have the foundation. So go do it. And then just helping bridge that gap.
Yeah, I love the idea that starting super small with some folks of like just walking in the door, like let's celebrate that. That's a huge success. Like let's start there as like our building point. And then we start looking at movements of like, hey, before, remember your squat stance wasn't great, things weren't great, but like look where you're at now. Like you can get into a great stance, and then now we start adding load. And so I love that there's this ability to see almost linear progression. Like there's going to be some ebbs and flows in there, but like we start small and we build, and then we just keep increasing the challenge to see what they're capable of while reminding them of what they've done, of what they've proven. Because yeah, it's so easy to forget the accomplishments or the things we've done along the way. And then the other thing I think you said that I really appreciate is what's the environment that you're creating? It's okay to push ourselves up against our potential and maybe make it or maybe not make it. And both are okay because in either situation, we're learning. And I know you mentioned there that this idea of like, I've never failed. And I came across, a speaker recently who said his idea of failure is it doesn't exist as long as you've learned or as long as whatever happened is not unrecuperable or like there's no going back, right? So as long as you can get back on the horse, as long as you've learned something, then we're not failing. We're just figuring something else out along the way. Now, has that looked different between the different populations? 'Cause I know you've spent a lot of time in college athletics where you start looking at like the 18 to 22 year olds. I know you're doing a lot of work now with youth development and helping those folks out as well as adults. Is it the same concepts across all those domains, or do you notice like there's some differences or nuances between like working with kids versus like college age versus working with adults?
They almost in a way ascend or progress. I'll try to see if I can give a good perspective on this. So adults, will come to you, either they're confident where they are, they just want to get maybe stronger, like they feel capable, or they have no guidance or have had no guidance, or they've had a bunch of failed relationships in the past with training or trying to pursue something, right? So they kind of sit in like extremes with adults. And you either get the one where like you really got to pull back, start from the ground up, or you get the ones that are just there already. So like they just need some guidance. With youth, talking 13 and up, in my opinion, they are a direct reflection of their environment / i.e. their parents. So what kind of home life are they having leads to like, you'll see a kid walk in nice and tall. How you doing? He may say, sir, he may not. He may be really respectable. He may not, but his presence, like he lets you know he's in the room. So he already has like a good foundation of confidence, whether or not it's false or not, doesn't matter. But he is presenting himself as somebody that can be seen. And then you get the ones that maybe don't have a lot of background of structured, maybe they haven't done any structured training or team sports settings. I've seen it with single parent family homes. I lived it myself. A lot of avoidance of eye contact, looking at the ground, very feeble, very quiet. A little bit more side to side conversations, a little bit more one-on-one when you pull them in, or if you're coaching them, you try to get next to them and talk about it. You don't necessarily say, hey, Billy, do this. Like, You know what I mean? You try not to like put them on the spotlight, because when they are on the spotlight, it's usually not a good outcome or not for a good reason. And then when you take those two and then you look at the 18 to 22-year-olds, the 18 to 22-year-olds, in my experiences over the last almost 2 decades, you get this tremendous wave of everything in between. So you get the kid that has no confidence, but man, oh man, the way he dresses, the way he talks, all that stuff, you would think he is like an Ed Milet type character, or one of the other big time speakers, right? Like he just exudes this stuff. But the second you poke him, the second you prod him, the second you make him strain a little bit, like it just disappears. You get the kids that like exude confidence, and they let you know they're confident, and they also let you know that they can actually like back it up. And then you will get kids that don't maybe know where they fit right now. But when you start to squeeze them, they let you know they have a place, and they actually end up like they can be grinders, right? Like I remember when we usually did ISOs a lot for, preparation at different parts of the year in college. But like you get a kid in an extreme ISO and the goal is to sit for 2 minutes. Like, I don't know if you've ever done it, but try holding a long extended split squat. Back knee's an inch off the ground. Front knee is stacked over ankle. You're on the ball of the foot of the front foot. You have to keep head, hips stacked, neutral, arms. Front hand is on the front leg hamstring glute to make sure it's squeezing. Left hand's on the back hamstring glute, and then you're trying to scissor with intent, right? Sit in that and try to hold that straight for 2 minutes without moving. Like, it brings things out of you. Like, you see different colors. I always used to say you're speaking colors, hearing words. But you'd get these kids that just kind of like, they kind of blend. You don't know where they're going to be yet. But you put them in that situation, they let you know real quick where they sit, and they sit at the top of the food chain. Because that kid that like maybe is all about it, he ain't all about it after about 30 seconds. He's on the floor, and that kid's looking at him like, yeah, what's up? I'll see you at practice tomorrow. And then next thing you know, so when you get those kids into those pressing or those pushing moments, you actually, this conversation is going to go all over the place. You get people into these exposures, right? So this kid that maybe he seemed confident, but like didn't really take a stance anywhere, you give him an exposure or an opportunity to do something that then proves, not to everybody else, it gave him proof to himself what he is and what he can do, right? So like on top of having like programming, periodized, progressed, it looks all nice and like it makes sense and it's leading to a specified outcome, right? Like there was always, I learned this from Adam Feit. He was my second boss at Eastern. He looked at me the one day, he goes, sometimes you just got to throw the book out the window. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, science is science. Principles are principles. Yes, they are all true. They're all foundational. They are proven, right? They are Lindy. But he's like, sometimes like you do just have to throw it out the window because you could go into a sport environment and you could have prepped, you go play Army and you're prepped for the wishbone basically for the next 4 quarters and they come out and spread. What are you doing? You didn't game plan for that, but like, what do you do? Right? So and again, that's 1,000-foot view, simple example, but it's like, so like when you lay out training structures, like we would always find a way to put something in that was non-invasively invasive, because it would give the athletes an opportunity to see where they stand against their peers. Now, that may not mean that they were as good from a performance side of things, but if we're talking confidence, like you take that kid that like everyone wrote off, and next thing you know, he is like beating everybody's butt in this opportunity, this setting. That kid's confidence through the roof. And that kid's confidence now may lead to the starter playing better because it may have inspired the starter, because now the starter's looking at that kid like, I can do more. Right. So like, and it all pulls back to those community aspects. So like, man, everyone's got the ability to impact, and like the ripples of your actions, like I'm a big believer, like the ripples of your actions go unseen for maybe years. But at some point, like it makes an impact that leads to significant change, significant opportunities, and significant results for people that you may have never realized. So.
Yeah. And I totally agree with all of those pieces, because what I think is so fascinating is that while there's so much science and things around how to lift and progressions and periodization, all that good stuff, if only human psychology worked the same way, but it doesn't, which means that there has to be this social intelligence along the way of how do I know when it's the appropriate and right time to challenge somebody to see what they're capable of, or maybe pull back on this person or pull them aside and go one-on-one versus, call them out in a big group. And I can tell that that's something that you're really passionate about, is blending good scientific principles and how we can progress and get you stronger with the development, that if those two aren't working together, we're never going to see what the true potential is. Is that something that you've just come to understand and learn over your years and experiences and having great leaders and bosses you've worked for? Is it something that you enjoy studying and reading and listening to? But how have you found the ability to blend the social intelligence and emotional intelligence of working with humans and with people, along with, I also know what to do when it comes to programming sets and reps and movements and things like that?
I think I would definitely say it's a blend. I thoroughly enjoy reading. So I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying on that side of things. But when you get around the unpredictable, the irrational, right? So for all the years of doing it has led to a lot of things that I don't know any book could ever really give you. Like I think books will provide you great structure and great baseline guidance. At some point, though, like being in the wild, you realize whether or not laying on the ground is going to protect you from a bear or not. But you might have missed the chapter that if it's a grizzly bear, you're screwed, right? So like the practical experience, I think, helps you transcend from the basic knowledge. And then for me, especially within the last coming up here on 4 years, it's honestly like, for me, it's been my wife and my kids, because I have become a much different, emotionally aware individual with having a wife and kids. And, a 2 and a 4-year-old will challenge you very quickly, and they will push you to the brink of exploding. But it's, like neither of my kids are trying to make me mad. Neither of my kids are trying to sit there and actually poke me to the point where I might lose my stuff, right? And like my 4-year-old, the one part of his brain's only 25% developed. So like if 1 out of 4 opportunities, like he does what we ask versus the other one, like we're winning because we're sitting right there in the statistics, right? So it's like there's always, I think there's a lost art and lost passion for the art side of it. And it's tricky, right? Because like there are certain things you need to hit to get development and to progress appropriately and to actually see people get outcomes, right? Because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for an outcome. They're looking for a change. But at the same time, if you have the emotional intelligence to interact with people and really feel where they're at, in my opinion, you can drastically either get to their desired outcome, their desired goal, either faster, safer, or with a heck of a lot more intent and passion, because now you're playing the full circle. So like kids I worked with in the collegiate level absolutely hated doing RDLs. Coach the heck out of it. It's technical. Most of the kids, their backs because they just wanted to get through it, right? So like it was over super coached and it was always a slow process. We always took our time. When the kids felt they could go open weight, we kept them back because we wanted to make sure the technique was better, because when you started putting load on, that's generally when the technique went out the window because the kids were just worried about the weight, right? But as you start to get more and more experience, so like when I first started off, like I'm like, oh, I hate coaching the RDL. But almost 20 years later, the presentation of the RDL is what changed. We still coached it the same, still kept it super simple, but how we presented why we were doing the RDL, its benefits, and then just how to achieve the outcome. Coaching stress on it way down, kids stress on it way down. The kids see it and they don't say, I don't want to do this now, right? So like all those experiences, and then as you get to know, like, and this is why it's so important, like getting to know people and having like your conversations that lead to like anything else other than what's going on, if it's appropriate for the setting, right? Like getting to understand people, like, and feeling like who they are, what they're about, beyond maybe the goal of why they're working with you, right? Because that, again, like you come to find out someone's not trying to lose 20 pounds because they want to weigh 20 pounds less. They're not, right? Like they might have just went through a bad breakup. They might have saw a photo of their kids and them 6 years ago and now they're looking at their kid 6 years older and they're looking at them. It's never usually the stated thing. It's something so much deeper. And like explaining why you're doing something is always a much deeper path or journey than just saying, hey, we're doing RDLs today. If that makes sense. I don't know if I explained that really good as it sounded in my mind, but like there's always something deeper to the journey of explaining and getting to like I always try to talk to people about their whys, right? Like I usually give people the 7-layer why exercise to truly figure out what it is you're fighting for. So I don't know if that makes sense, but you ask yourself like, I want to lose 20 pounds. Why? You get an answer. Why? Right? And then generally when you answer the 7th why to the preceding answer you gave, you hit the root cause of what it is. So it's not 20 pounds. It is, I would like to live 20 years more so I can see my kids at X age. And then you get to like what they will never abandon or why they will continue to pursue or persist in what it is they said they want to achieve.
Yeah. And I love that exercise. And I think that ties so nicely into why we get into this thing of why we're trying to help people. It's like, yeah, it's cool to see people's lifts improve or to see their body compositions change or things like that. But it's really fun to see people's confidence improve. It's really fun to see the way that they take what they're learning and doing in the gym and put it into a life that they're excited about and passionate about. And you can see the growth and development there, which makes me curious because I'd love to hear, being in the college space for so long and then starting your own gym with Undenied Fitness. Give me a little perspective on what led you to wanting to start your own gym and a little bit of, when you think about the people you're trying to work with or serve, give us a little sense or an idea of how did Undenied Fitness come to be and where do you see the gym going or who do you see yourself impacting through it?
To keep it simple, my boss at the time got let go. And then our head football coach hired from outside. They had a full staff, so we all got let go. It was in, I think the official day was like December 14th of 2022. So, and that was, I don't know, 10, 11 days before Christmas. And it was 2 months before our second son was born. So I got let go. And my wife had a full-time job. Like we were fine. I was 38 at the time. Just turned 38. And for the first time in my life, I was unemployed. And for the first time in my life, for almost 2 decades, I was no longer a strength coach. So and all I had known was to be a strength coach. So I remember, I take my oldest to daycare. My wife was at work. I went home and I remember just sitting in my chair at our house, bawling uncontrollably because I realized for the first time, because I finally had a reason to get perspective, I had no idea who I was. No idea. No idea about my values, what I stood on, what I was about. Everything, my whole world literally shattered in one day. And I remember just sitting there and it was I don't remember what I was listening to. I was listening to something with a podcast, and it was I kept having the thought of who could you become, which became our line. Well, okay, everything's gone. You are in a white room. Everything's gone. Who could you become? What is it? Take a step back and what is this? And then shortly thereafter, our basement flooded, and I had to rip out drywall and do mold mitigation, all that stuff. And I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and I think it was with him and Cameron I'm going to say this wrong, Cameron Haynes. And they were talking about just make yourself so undeniable. And I was like, who could you become if you were undenied? If you literally laid this thing out, so if you were undenied, what would that mean, right? So it came through all this process full circle, and then looking back at my environment as a kid, being unconfident and mentally, physically not in the best situations. And then that leading to confidence issues and capable issues and not wanting to do stuff and being afraid and being inconsistent and all these things. And that's really how the gym name and everything came to. And I will say this, what's hard about what we're doing over here is ironically, and this is not by design, all the adult members we have are for some odd reason, they're all entrepreneurs or business owners, which is weird to me. Like, because we don't advertise that, we don't say that. But the thing that I find challenging is it's a mindset. It's about like literally like, I want to change this and I'm willing to become exceptional, which means I will be the exception, right? And this goes back to like all our layers of our whys, right? So like for us, Undenied is actually layer 6. Our 7th layer is endure. And that to me is the epitome of everything. So in endure, we call it the end. End is short for endure. And endure is, for us, is to sustain in existence, right? So like we talk about, like plant trees will never see, right? And these things come to me because when I was sitting there in my chair crying, not knowing what to do or who I was or any of this stuff, like I realized I had an almost 2-year-old and another one on the way. And it's like, I don't want my kids to live and grow the way I did. Like, and you hear that stuff all the time, like, you can be whatever you want, right? But I'm sitting here telling you that, and I didn't do or become anything I wanted. Like, I got stuck in the rut, and I got stuck doing this, and I decided not to pursue, and like, that's kind of risky, or like, I'm scared to jump, so I'm not like, all these things started flooding in my head when we started building this atmosphere. And it just goes back to my kids. Like, I don't know if we'll be successful. I can honestly admit that. I have no clue. I know this though. I am going to the brink of the edge. Like, I'm going till I can't walk anymore. We will exhaust everything and we will learn at the end of it no matter what happens. But like, we're not outcome driven. We're progress driven, right? That's our view of success, is progressing. So like, we keep punching the ticket every day. We track what is getting us a result or getting us to an outcome. And if it's not, we ditch it. And then like for my kids, which I want to show them that like, hey, like we did this, right? You need the stack of proof though, which is our layer 5, if you're still paying attention at home. So layer 5 is the stack of proof, which means what? You need reps, and you just need to rep. You need to keep getting reps and keep stacking the thing. Like, I've done this, cool, add it on top. I've done this, cool, add it on top. I did this, didn't work out well, put it here, but don't put it next to the pile, because we want to remember that like we did something here, right? Whether it was good, bad, negative, neutral, doesn't matter. Like, we've learned, we've done something to learn from. So more proof. And then when you stack enough proof, like, you can become undenied in whatever venture you want. But like in our world, there's a method to the madness of learning and reiterating. And then like, to be undenied means like no just isn't applicable. You know, like, cause for me, like when I was growing up, like everyone was like, oh, you're big boned. You know, I was 13 and everyone's like, oh, you still got baby fat. I'm like, damn, this baby fat's like sticking around. Like, what the heck? Like, this must be like the hardest thing ever. Right. So it's like, you know, when I did a bodybuilding show, like everyone's like, you can't do a bodybuilding show. And I was like, why? They're like, well, you used to be super fat. You're still kind of like husky. And 3, like, there's no way. And it's like, well, why? But like, what? Like, why? Where does that come? Where does any of that influence my ability to perform or to try to do a bodybuilding show? Right. So it's like all these things. And again, this goes back to the statement I made earlier. Like, I think we're in a shitty world, and I don't think there's enough good people, and not just having good intentions. I mean, like, people that are living things. Like, you are living life right now, right? So like, when you talk to people, you have your stack of proof, right? And we're brand new and we're small and like all this and that, but like, we're trying to build our stack of proof, and we're trying to help other people build their stack of proof to change. Like, cause like when like everything we're doing, like even you guys, like, it's about change. Like, and it's, man, like it irks me so much, like, to see anybody, a kid, an adult, a kid in college, like, walk with their head down or question whether or not they're capable, or question whether or not they should think this way, or they should do this or should not do this. Like, the fact that people still think they should not do things is like such a terrible thing from my perspective. Like, I'm not saying it's for everybody, but for the way where I stand, I think it's a terrible thing for people to experience. So all of those experiences growing up, and then the biggest reason of getting into the youth side of things is simply my wife and I spent almost 40 years combined in athletics, And to see a 18 to 22-year-old come in with like bilateral labral tears, no hip internal rotation, ankles that are stronger than a steel beam because they don't move. It's like, well, that's really bad for being 18. So like what led to this? And well, it's what they did the previous 3, 5, 7 years, right? So trying to give kids an opportunity to be in a better spot when they get their chance to go to the next level. And also like the conversation can get really loaded here because the 8th graders that are already 16 years into being professional sport players, and they've still got another 8 years of development before they get an opportunity to display their abilities on a competitive scale, whether that's collegiate or if they end up going to the pro level right out of high school, right? Like, how do you help those kids? Because those kids are all over the place, right? Like, are they getting prepared the right way? Are they getting, their ankle and their feet ready for any of the demands they're going through? Things like that. So those are all the concepts that we're trying to help people with and help navigate through and educate on. And they're things that we see as being concerning, especially like I said, like I'm going to be a parent here of one of those kids at some point soon, but then later, so try to think about like, how do you actually prepare the future for the best future they can have, right? So trying to raise the standard on what happens with youth development from a strength conditioning, power, speed perspective so that those kids have a chance to get to where they can go without having all the issues that we saw at the collegiate level.
Yeah, it's something that comes to mind is, people typically don't care what you do. They care why you do it. And hearing the story of your experiences of working in college athletics, of being put up against it, of figuring out like, okay, I got to really buckle down and do my 7 whys and figure out why I'm doing what I'm doing, and for my kids and for the next generation, and help people be more confident so that they can have the life that they want to live. I hear all of those factors into why you do what you do. And I'm excited to continue to see how Undenied Fitness impacts people's lives, whether in the youth level or in the adult level. So for folks out there who are interested to either connect or hear more about what you're doing, what are the best ways to reach or connect with you?
Undenied Fitness on Instagram is our primary right now. We also have a Facebook page that we are trying to match what we do social media wise on Instagram with. It's called Undenied Fitness New because our old page got hacked. And then we've got our website, undeniedfitness.com. And all our contact info, my number's on there. It's a direct line to my phone. So if anybody wants to reach out, feel free with questions or anything. We'd love to just help or be a resource. And for us, we are still just trying to get to know people, meet people, and build relationships with people like you, Brad, because you've been super welcoming in a space where sometimes people that are in this space are not super welcoming. But I would say that's because we probably both come from an abundant mindset. There is more grass than people could ever imagine. So
yeah, there's a whole lot of kids and a lot of people. You just drive around town and go into local stores. There's a lot of people we can impact, and however they find health and wellness and fitness that lets them live the life they're wanting to, I'm game. So I agree. And so, Greg, this was awesome getting to hear your story and dive in more. Excited to see how you continue to evolve and grow and take Undenied Fitness to the next level, and excited to help support in any way we can. And look forward to our next time we get a chance to interact with each other.
I appreciate you, Brad. Thank you for your time.